Princess Yuna stood in her private chamber aboard the Royal Velkin ship as it traveled through space toward Earth. She held a datapad in her blue hands and studied the profile of her future husband for the 100th time. The human named Taeho looked incredible in his photos. He was tall and muscular with battle scars across his chest. The reports said he had saved entire planets and defeated armies of space pirates single-handedly. In Velkin culture, strength was everything. Warriors were the most respected members of society, and only the strongest could marry into the royal family. Yuna had trained her whole life to be a perfect warrior princess. She could break steel with her bare hands and fight a dozen enemies at once. But she had never found a mate who could match her power. Most Velkin males were either too weak or too afraid of her status as royalty when her father, the emperor, showed her Taehozia application. She was amazed. Here was a human who seemed to have no fear, someone who fought for justice and protected the innocent. The photos showed him standing over defeated monsters with confidence and pride. His eyes looked kind, but determined. This was exactly the type of mate she had always dreamed of finding. Yuna spent the entire journey to Earth learning about human culture. She studied Korean language and customs because that was Taehozia background. She practiced cooking human foods and learned about Earth history. She wanted to be the perfect wife for such an amazing warrior. By the time they reached Earth, she could speak Korean almost perfectly and knew everything about human traditions. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Taeho was having the worst week of his life. He had tried to tell his supervisor Dongmin that they needed to cancel the whole thing, but Dongmin refused. The marriage contract was already signed by both governments, and breaking it could cause a war. The media had found out about the story, and reporters were camping outside Taeho's tiny apartment building. Headlines called him the bravest human alive, and the man who would unite two worlds through love. Taeho bought every book he could find about Velkin culture. He stayed up all night studying their language and customs. He learned that Velkins valued honor and courage above all else. They had special ceremonies for warriors and believed that strength came from the heart as much as the body. The more he read, the more terrified he became. How could he possibly fool a race of super warriors into thinking he was one of them? The day of Princess Yuna's arrival finally came. Taeho put on his best suit, which was actually his only suit, and made his way to the spaceport. Hundreds of people had gathered to watch the historic moment. Television crews from around the world were broadcasting live. Government officials and diplomats filled the VIP section. Taeho felt like he was walking to his own execution. When the Velkin ship landed, it was unlike anything Taeho had ever seen. It was huge and silver with strange symbols glowing along its sides. The landing ramp lowered with a hiss of steam, and suddenly there she was. Princess Yuna stepped into the Earth sunlight, and Taeho forgot how to breathe. She was the most beautiful being he had ever seen. Yes, she was 7 feet tall and obviously incredibly strong, but she moved with perfect grace. Her blue skin seemed to shimmer in the light, and her silver markings looked like elegant artwork. Her long white hair flowed behind her like silk, and her purple eyes were bright with intelligence and kindness. When she saw Taeho, she smiled, and his heart nearly stopped beating. Hello, Taeho, she said in perfect Korean with just a slight accent that made her voice sound musical. I am Yuna, and I am so happy to finally meet you. She walked toward him with confident steps, and Taeho noticed that everyone else looked tiny compared to her. Hello, princess, he managed to say back. His voice came out as a squeak, but she did not seem to notice. She was looking at him with such warmth and admiration that he felt confused. Why was she looking at him like he was something special? You are smaller than I expected, she said, still smiling, but I can see the strength in your eyes. True warriors do not need to be large to be powerful. She reached out and took his hand in hers. Her skin was warm and her touch was gentle despite her obvious strength. The crowd cheered and cameras flashed as they walked together toward the waiting car. Taeho felt like he was in a dream. This amazing alien princess was holding his hand and treating him like he was important. For the first time in his life, someone was looking at him with respect and admiration instead of pity or mockery. Their first dinner together was at a fancy restaurant that the government had reserved just for them. Yuna had changed into a beautiful dress that was made from some kind of shimmering alien fabric. She looked like a goddess, but she seemed genuinely interested in everything Taeho had to say. She asked him about his family and his hobbies and listened carefully to every answer. Then the conversation took a turn that made Taeho panic. "Tell me about your greatest battle," she said, leaning forward with excitement. "I want to hear about how you defeated the space pirates near Jupiter. The report said you fought them alone for 3 days." Taeho nearly choked on his food. He had no idea what she was talking about. The fake application had apparently included stories about battles. That never happened. Well, he said, trying to think of something to say. It was not really that interesting. "I prefer not to talk about fighting." Yuna looked even more impressed. "Of course," she said, nodding wisely. "Only the greatest warriors are humble about their victories. You do not need to boast because your actions speak for themselves." This is exactly what I hope to find in a mate. Throughout dinner, Yuna kept asking about scars and weapons and battle strategies. Each time Taeho tried to change the subject, she became more convinced that he was being modest. She told him about her own training and battles, and he listened with genuine fascination. She was clearly incredibly skilled and intelligent, but she was also kind and funny. She made jokes about clumsy mistakes she had made while learning to fight and laughed at herself in a way that made Taeho feel comfortable. When Yuna moved into Taeho's small apartment the next day, she was surprised by how simple everything was. She had expected a warrior's home to be full of weapons and trophies, but instead she found books and plants and family photos. There was a small kitchen and a cozy living room with soft furniture. Everything was clean and organized in a way that showed care and attention to detail. "This is perfect," she said, looking around with approval. "You focus on what truly matters instead of showing off with material things. This shows wisdom and inner strength." She unpacked her few belongings and immediately began making the space feel like home for both of them. Over the next few days, Yuna did things that amazed Taeho. She fixed his broken air conditioner by rebuilding the motor with her bare hands. She carried his heavy furniture around like it weighed nothing when she decided to redecorate. She even scared away some bullies who were bothering an old man in their neighborhood just by standing up and crossing her arms. But she was also incredibly gentle with Taeho. She cooked meals for him using recipes she had learned from Korean cooking shows. She listened to his problems at work and gave him advice that actually helped. She laughed at his jokes even when they were not very funny. She seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with him and treated him like he was the most important person in the universe. The only problem was that she kept asking him to demonstrate his fighting skills. She wanted to spar with him or see him practice with weapons. Each time he made excuses about being tired or not wanting to fight unless absolutely necessary. This seemed to make her admire him even more because she thought it showed how controlled and disciplined he was. Taeho began to realize that he was falling in love with this amazing alien princess, but he also knew that their relationship was built on a lie. How long could he keep pretending to be something he was not? What would happen when she discovered the truth about who he really was? 2 weeks had passed since Princess Yuna moved in with Taeho, and life had become wonderfully strange. Every morning, Taeho woke up to the smell of alien spices as Yuna cooked breakfast in their tiny kitchen. She had learned to make Korean rice and soup, but she added Velkan herbs that made everything taste amazing. She was always humming while she worked, and the sound made Taeho feel happy in a way he had never experienced before. But small things kept happening that confused Yuna about her warrior husband. Yesterday, a spider had crawled across the bathroom floor, and Taeho had jumped onto the toilet seat screaming for her to kill it. When she asked why such a great fighter was afraid of tiny creatures, he said he was saving his energy for bigger threats. She found this answer wise and noble. Last week they had gone grocery shopping together, and Taeho struggled to open a jar of pickles. His face turned red from effort, and his hands shook as he twisted the lid. Yuna had to take it from him and open it easily with one hand. When other shoppers stared at them, Taiho looked embarrassed, but Yuna thought he was just being considerate by letting her show her strength. The strangest thing was how Taiho acted during action movies. Yuna loved watching human entertainment and had developed a passion for martial arts films. But whenever fight scenes came on screen, Taiho would cover his eyes or leave the room claiming he needed water. She assumed this was because real combat was too serious for entertainment and that watching fake fighting offended his warrior spirit. What Yuna did not understand was that these behaviors made her love Taiho even more. In Velkan society, the strongest warriors were often the gentlest people. They had nothing to prove because everyone already knew their power. She thought Taiho's kindness and sensitivity showed how secure he was in his abilities. Only someone truly confident would help elderly neighbors, carry groceries, or cry during sad movies. One afternoon, Dongmin decided to visit with some other co-workers to see how his prank was going. He brought Hyeonwoo and Bioram along with a few others from the embassy. They were curious about the alien princess and wanted to get a good laugh at Taiho's expense. They expected to find him miserable and struggling to keep up the act. Instead, they found Taiho and Yuna working together in their small garden on the apartment balcony. Yuna was using her incredible strength to move heavy pots while Taiho carefully planted seeds and explained how each vegetable would grow. They were laughing and talking in a mixture of Korean and Velkan words. They looked like a couple who had been married for years instead of just 2 weeks. "Welcome to our home," said Yuna when she saw the visitors. She stood up gracefully and towered over all of them. Her presence was so commanding that the usually loud group became quiet and polite. "Taiho has told me so much about his work friends. Please come inside and have some tea." As they sat in the living room, Yuna served tea in delicate cups while asking questions about their jobs at the embassy. She was genuinely interested in their answers and made each person feel important. But then she started asking them about Taiho's military service and his famous battles. The co-workers looked at each other with panic in their eyes. Dongmin cleared his throat nervously. "Oh yes," he said, "Taiho is very modest about his achievements. He never likes to talk about his heroic deeds. That is why we thought we should come and tell you some stories ourselves." What followed was the most ridiculous hour of Taiho's life. His co-workers began making up increasingly wild stories about his imaginary military career. Henu claimed that Taiho had once fought off an entire alien invasion fleet with nothing but a mop handle. Bioram said she had personally seen him lift a crashed spaceship to save trapped civilians underneath. Each story was more unbelievable than the last. Yuna listened with bright eyes and took notes on her datapad. She asked detailed questions about battle tactics and weapon techniques. The co-workers had to keep inventing new lies to answer her questions. By the end of the visit, they were sweating and exhausted from trying to keep their stories straight. Meanwhile, Taiho sat quietly, wishing the floor would open up and swallow him whole after the visitors left. Yuna was more excited than ever about her amazing husband. She spent the evening asking him to show her the fighting moves his friends had described. She wanted to learn his special techniques and maybe spar with him to test her own skills. Taiho kept making excuses about needing to rest or not wanting to damage the apartment furniture. That night, as they lay in bed, Taiho stared at the ceiling and knew he could not continue living this lie. Yuna was the most wonderful person he had ever met, and she deserved to know the truth. She had been nothing but kind and loving to him while he had been deceiving her from the very beginning. It was not fair to her, and it was destroying him inside. The next morning, while Yuna was out buying groceries, Taiho made a decision. He would tell her everything when she came home. He practiced what he would say over and over until he had memorized every word. He would explain about the prank and the fake application and how he was really just a janitor who had never been in a fight. He would tell her that he understood if she wanted to leave and return to her home planet. When Yuna came back, she found Taiho sitting at their small kitchen table looking very serious. She could tell something was wrong because his hands were shaking and he would not look at her directly. She sat down across from him and took his hands in hers. "What is troubling you, my brave husband?" she asked with concern in her voice. You can tell me anything, and I will understand. Teho took a deep breath and began to speak. Yuna, I need to tell you something important, and I'm afraid you will hate me when you hear it. I'm not the person you think I am. I am not a warrior, or a hero, or anything special at all. I'm just a janitor who cleans floors at the embassy. The marriage application was fake. My supervisor filled it out as a cruel joke because he thought it would be funny to see me panic when nothing came of it. He told her about the photoshopped pictures and the made-up stories about battles that never happened. He explained how shocked everyone was when the Velkan Empire actually accepted the proposal. He admitted that he had never been in a real fight, and that he was afraid of spiders and could not even open pickle jars without help. I have been lying to you since the day we met, he said with tears in his eyes. You deserve someone who is actually brave and strong and worthy of your love. I understand if you want to leave me and find a real warrior to marry. Yuna listened to everything without saying a single word. Her face showed no emotion, and Teho could not tell what she was thinking. When he finished talking, she was quiet for a long time. Teho was sure she was preparing to tell him how disappointed and angry she was. Instead, Yuna began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, but grew into full, joyful laughter that filled their entire apartment. She laughed so hard that tears came to her purple eyes and she had to hold her sides. Teho stared at her in complete confusion. My sweet, foolish husband, she said when she finally stopped laughing. Do you really think I did not know all of this already? I figured out the truth during our first dinner together. No warrior would be so gentle with a flower or so kind to a rude waiter. No fighter would flinch at movie violence or need help opening jars. But I do not care about any of that, she continued. In all my travels across the galaxy, I have never met anyone as brave as you. Do you know how much courage it takes to be kind? In a world that rewards cruelness, do you understand how strong you must be to take care of others when no one takes care of you? You told me the truth even though you were terrified I would leave. That is real bravery. She reached across the table and touched his face gently. True strength is not about winning fights or conquering enemies. It is about protecting what you love and never giving up hope. It is about choosing to be good when being bad would be easier. These are the qualities of a real warrior, and you have them all. Teho felt like his heart might burst with happiness and relief. This incredible woman had known the truth all along and loved him anyway. She saw something in him that he had never seen in himself. For the first time in his life, someone believed he was worthy of love and respect, but their happiness was about to be interrupted by trouble from the stars. Teho pushed his mop bucket down the shiny hallway of the Galactic Embassy building on Earth. The wheels squeaked with each step he took. It was 6 in the morning and most people were still sleeping, but Teho had been working since 4. He liked the quiet hours when no one was around to bother him. The embassy was huge with marble floors that reflected the lights from alien technology displays. Giant windows showed views of spaceships coming and going from the landing pads outside. At 25 years old, Teho had been working as a janitor here for 3 years. He was short and thin with messy black hair that never stayed neat, no matter how much he tried to fix it. His uniform was always too big for his small frame. Other workers at the embassy treated him like he was invisible. They walked past him without saying hello. Some even made jokes about how he looked like a teenager who got lost on his way to school. The worst one was his supervisor, Dongmin. Dongmin was a big man with a loud voice who thought he was very funny. He had worked at the embassy for 10 years and knew everyone. People laughed at his jokes even when they were not funny because he decided who got good shifts and who got stuck cleaning the bathrooms. Dongmin loved to pick on Teho because Teho never fought back or complained. This morning Dongmin was in an especially good mood. He had just gotten a promotion to head of building operations. To celebrate, he wanted to play a big prank on someone. When he saw Teho mopping near the alien marriage program office, he got a terrible idea. The marriage program was something the galactic government created to help different species become friends through arranged marriages. Most humans thought it was silly, and no one from Earth had ever signed up. Dong-Min called his friends over. There was Han Wu from security who always wore sunglasses inside. There was also from the front desk who loved gossip more than anything. They gathered around Dongmin's computer and started laughing about something on the screen. "Hey, Taeho, come here," said Dongmin with a big grin. Taeho stopped mopping and walked over slowly. He could tell when Dongmin was planning something mean because his eyes got bright and he smiled too much. "You know what?" Taeho said, "Dongmin, I think you need a girlfriend. You're always so lonely and sad. Maybe you should try the alien marriage program." The others started giggling. Taeho felt his face get hot with embarrassment. He did not have a girlfriend and everyone knew it. He was too shy to talk to women and spent most of his free time reading books or watching old movies. "I don't think that is a good idea, sir," said Taeho quietly. He tried to go back to his mopping, but Dongmin grabbed his arm. No, I am serious," said Dongmin. "Look at all these alien species looking for husbands. You could be perfect for one of them." He pointed at his computer screen, which showed profiles of different aliens seeking marriage partners. Hyan Wu leaned over and looked at the screen. "Oh, look at this one," he said, pointing to a picture of a 7-foot-tall blue alien with silver markings. "Princess Yuna from the Velkan Empire. It says here she is looking for a brave warrior husband." Everyone burst out laughing. The idea of tiny, quiet Taeho being matched with a giant alien warrior princess was the funniest thing they had ever heard. "Please just let me work," said Taeho. He felt like crying, but he did not want to give them more reasons to laugh at him. But Dongmin was not done. He had an idea that he thought was brilliant. What if he actually signed Taeho up for the program as a joke? Of course, nothing would happen because aliens would never want to marry a human janitor. But it would be funny to watch Taeho worry about it for a few weeks. "Actually, you know what," said Dongmin, "I am going to help you out. I'm going to sign you up right now as your supervisor. I think this would be great for your personal development." Taeho tried to protest, but Dongmin was already typing on his computer. Beoram was taking pictures of Taeho with her phone while Hyeon-woo held him still. They were all laughing so hard they could barely breathe. For the next hour, Dongmin filled out a fake application for Taeho. He wrote that Taeho was a decorated war hero who had fought space pirates and saved 3 planets from destruction. He said Taeho was 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds of pure muscle. He claimed Taeho spoke 12 languages and had training in every form of combat known to humans. The hardest part was the photos. Dongmin was good with computers, so he took Taeho's employee ID picture and used photo editing software to make him look completely different. He added muscles and scars and put Taeho in military uniforms. He even created fake pictures of Taeho fighting monsters and leading armies into battle. The final result looked nothing like the real Taeho. When they were finished, Dongmin hit the submit button with a dramatic flourish. There he said, "Your application has been sent to the Velkan Empire. I put you down as interested in Princess Yuna specifically. She should be very impressed by your credentials." Taeho stared at the computer screen in horror. His fake profile made him look like some kind of superhero. "There is no way this will work," he thought to himself. "The aliens will know it is fake." Right away, the other workers spent the rest of the day telling everyone in the building about the prank. Soon dozens of people knew that shy little Taeho had been signed up to marry an alien warrior princess. They all thought it was the funniest thing ever. Some even started taking bets on how long it would take for the aliens to reject the application. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. Taeho almost forgot about the whole thing. He went back to his normal routine of cleaning floors and emptying trash cans. Sometimes people would see him and make jokes about his alien bride, but mostly everyone moved on to other gossip. Then, on a Tuesday morning, everything changed. Taeho was eating lunch alone in the break room when Dongmin burst through the door. His face was white as paper and his hands were shaking. Behind him came Beoram and Hyeon-woo looking just as scared. Taeho said Dongmin in a voice that was barely a whisper, "We have a problem." "A big problem? What do you mean?" asked Taeho. He had never seen Dongmin look so serious. The Valken said, "Yes," replied Dongmin. "They accepted your marriage proposal? Princess Yuna is coming to Earth next week to meet her new husband. The sandwich fell out of Taeho's hands. He felt like the room was spinning around him. This was not supposed to happen. It was just a joke. A stupid, mean joke that was never supposed to work, but now it was real. An alien princess was coming to marry him, and she thought he was some kind of warrior hero. What was he going to do when she found out the truth? What would happen when she discovered that her brave husband was just a scared janitor who had never been in a fight in his life? Tae-ho looked at Dong-min and the others. They were all staring at him like he was about to explode. For the first time in his life, Tae-ho felt truly terrified. But he also felt something else, something he had never felt before. Maybe this was his chance to finally do something important with his life. Maybe this was fate giving him an opportunity to be the hero he had always dreamed of being, or maybe he was about to make the biggest mistake in galactic history. 3 days after Tae-ho and Yuna shared the truth about everything, their peaceful life was shattered by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Tae-ho was at work mopping the embassy floors when alarms began blaring throughout the building. Emergency! Lights flashed red and automated voices announced that an unscheduled Velkan military ship was approaching Earth without permission. Through the large windows, Tae-ho could see a massive black warship descending from the sky. It was 3 times larger than the elegant vessel that had brought Yuna to Earth and covered in weapon systems that gleamed menacingly in the sunlight. The ship landed with such force that it cracked the concrete landing pad and sent vibrations through the entire embassy building. Tae-ho dropped his mop and ran toward the exit, but security guards stopped him at the door. No one was allowed to leave until they knew whether this was a friendly visit or the beginning of an invasion. Through the windows he watched as armored Velkan soldiers marched down the ship's loading ramp in perfect formation. Their leader was the largest Velkan Tae-ho had ever seen, with deep blue skin covered in battle scars and silver armor that looked like it had survived 1,000 wars. Meanwhile, at their apartment, Yuna was preparing lunch when she heard the familiar sound of Velkan military engines. She stepped onto their balcony and saw the warship landing at the embassy. Her heart filled with dread because she recognized the ship immediately. It belonged to Commander Cairo of the Imperial Guard, and his presence on Earth could only mean trouble. Cairo had been her closest friend when they were children growing up in the royal palace. They had trained together, learned to fight together, and shared dreams of becoming great warriors. As they grew older, everyone expected them to marry someday, because they seemed like a perfect match. Both were strong, both were from noble families, and both had dedicated their lives to serving the empire. But Yuna had never felt romantic love for Cairo, even though she cared about him deeply. He was like a brother to her, and the thought of marrying him felt wrong. When she told him this years ago, he had been hurt and angry. He believed that their friendship and shared values should be enough to build a marriage on. He could not understand why she would choose to remain single rather than accept what seemed like an obvious partnership. When Cairo learned that Yuna had agreed to marry a human, he had been furious. He considered it an insult to their people and to their personal history together. He had tried to convince the emperor to cancel the marriage, but the old ruler was curious about humans and wanted to see what would happen. Now it seemed that Cairo had decided to take matters into his own hands. Within an hour, government officials arrived at Tae-ho and Yuna's apartment with a formal escort. They explained that Commander Cairo had requested an immediate meeting with Princess Yuna and her human husband. The meeting would take place at the embassy in front of diplomatic representatives from both worlds. This was clearly not a social visit. Tae-ho had never seen Yuna look so serious as they traveled to the embassy in the official car. She held his hand tightly and spoke to him in a low voice about Cairo and their history together. She explained that he was one of the finest warriors in the Velkan military and that he had always believed they were meant to be together. She warned Tae-ho that Cairo would probably try to challenge the validity of their marriage. The embassy conference room had been set up like a courtroom with chairs for witnesses and a large table in the center. Human diplomats sat on one side while Velkan officers sat on the other. At the head of the table stood Commander Cairo in his full military regalia. He was even more intimidating in person than he had looked from a distance, with muscles that bulged beneath his armor and eyes that burned with barely controlled anger. When Tae-ho and Yuna entered the room, Cairo looked at them with obvious disgust. He stared at tiny Teho as if he could not believe this was the human who had stolen his intended bride. Then he looked at Yuna with hurt and disappointment that was painful to see. It was clear that his feelings for her ran much deeper than simple friendship or political ambition. Princess Yuna, said Cairo in a voice that echoed through the room. I bring greetings from your father the Emperor and urgent news from home. The Royal Council has reconsidered your marriage to this human and decided that it was a mistake. They have sent me to escort you back to Velkan space where you will fulfill your duty to our people by marrying a suitable mate from our own species. He placed an official document on the table with the imperial seal clearly visible. The Emperor has decided that humans are too weak and primitive to be worthy partners for Velkan royalty. Your marriage to this creature brings shame upon our entire race and threatens the strength of future generations. You will return with me immediately. And this embarrassing episode will be forgotten. Yuna stood up slowly and her eyes flashed with anger that made everyone in the room take a step backward. She was no longer the gentle woman who cooked breakfast and tended plants on their balcony. Now she looked every inch the warrior princess she had been raised to be. Her voice was cold and commanding when she spoke. I will not return with you, said Yuna. I have found my true mate and I will not abandon him for political convenience. My father gave me permission to choose my own husband and I have chosen. If the council has changed their minds, then they can send their complaints to me directly instead of sending you to do their work. Kai-Ro slammed his fist on the table with such force that it cracked the wooden surface. This is not a request, Yuna, he shouted. This is a direct order from the imperial throne. You are still a subject of the empire and you will obey your father's commands. Then he pointed at Teho with contempt. Look at him, Yuna, he said. This pathetic creature could not protect you from a child, let alone the enemies of our people. You were meant to marry a warrior, not a servant who trembles at shadows. I have loved you since we were children, and I can give you the life you deserve. The room fell silent as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Teho felt like he was watching a drama on television, except that his entire future depended on the outcome. He knew that Cairo was right about one thing. He could not protect Yuna from the dangers of the galaxy. He was not strong enough or brave enough or skilled enough to be the partner she needed, but then Yuna moved to stand beside Teho and took his hand in hers. Her touch gave him strength and reminded him that she had chosen him for reasons that had nothing to do with physical power. She had seen something in him that even he did not fully understand yet. If my father truly wishes me to return, then he can come to Earth and ask me himself, said Yuna. Until then I will remain with my husband. Our marriage is legal under both human and Velkan law, and I will not dissolve it based on the complaints of jealous council members. Kai-Ro face turned an even deeper shade of blue with rage. Very well, he said through gritted teeth. If you will not listen to reason, then we will settle this according to ancient tradition. I challenge your human mate to single combat. If he defeats me in honorable battle, then your marriage will stand, and I will return home alone. If I defeat him, then you will accept that he is unworthy and return with me to marry someone of proper strength. The challenge echoed through the room like thunder. In Velkan culture, this was the most serious form of dispute resolution, and once issued, it could not be refused without bringing dishonor upon everyone involved. Yuna tried to object, but Cairo cut her off by explaining that only the challenged party could accept or decline the combat. All eyes turned to Teho. He looked at this massive alien warrior who could probably crush him with one hand. He thought about his quiet life as a janitor and his complete lack of fighting experience. Every logical part of his mind screamed that he should refuse the challenge and let Yuna return to her home planet where she would be safe and happy. But then he looked at Yuna and saw the faith she had in him burning bright in her purple eyes. She believed he was brave enough to face this challenge, even though she knew he was not a trained fighter. She had told him that real courage came from protecting what you love, no matter how scared you might be. I accept your challenge, said Teho, in a voice that was steadier than he felt. The words surprised everyone in the room, including himself. Cairo smiled with grim satisfaction, while the human diplomats looked horrified at the thought of their citizen fighting an alien super soldier. The combat will take place in 3 days, said Cairo. That will give you time to prepare your will and say goodbye to your loved ones. The battle will be fought according to traditional Vulcan rules with weapons of your choice. There will be no interference from outside parties, and the fight will continue until one of us surrenders or dies. As the meeting ended and people began filing out of the room, Tejo realized what he had just committed himself to. In 3 days, he would face one of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy in a fight that would determine not only his own fate, but the future happiness of the woman he loved. He had no idea how he was going to survive, but he knew he had to try. The next 3 days would be the most important of his entire life. The 3 days between accepting Kairos' challenge and the actual fight passed like a strange dream for Tejo. News of the combat had spread across Earth and beyond, making him the most famous human in the galaxy. Reporters camped outside his apartment building asking him how he felt about fighting an alien super soldier. Government officials offered him military training and advanced weapons, but Tejo politely refused everything. Instead, he spent his time in quiet preparation with Yuna by his side. She taught him basic meditation techniques that Vulcan warriors used to center their minds before battle. She showed him stretching exercises that would help his body stay flexible and loose. Most importantly, she talked to him about the mental aspects of combat, and how fear could be either a weakness or a source of strength depending on how you used it. You do not need to be the strongest person to win a fight, she explained as they sat together in their small garden. You need to be the smartest and the most determined. Cairo is powerful, but he is also angry, and that anger will make him careless. He expects to defeat you easily, so he will not be prepared for creativity or patience. Tejo tried to absorb her lessons, but part of him still could not believe this was really happening. 3 months ago, he had been an invisible janitor whose biggest worry was avoiding his mean supervisor. Now he was preparing to fight for the right to stay married to an alien princess in front of the entire galaxy. Life had become more strange and wonderful and terrifying than he ever could have imagined. On the morning of the battle, Tejo woke up before dawn and found that he was surprisingly calm. He had spent so much time being afraid over the past few days that he had no fear left inside him. He felt empty and clean, like a cup that had been washed and was ready to be filled with whatever the day would bring. Yuna was already awake beside him, and she smiled when she saw his peaceful expression. You look ready, she said softly. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that you have already proven yourself to me. You faced this challenge when you could have run away, and that makes you braver than any warrior I have ever known. The battle was scheduled to take place in the city's largest stadium, which had been modified for the occasion. A special fighting arena had been built in the center of the field, with energy barriers to protect the audience from stray weapons fire. Every seat in the stadium was filled, and millions more people around the galaxy were watching on television. This was being called the most important single combat in galactic history. Tejo arrived at the stadium wearing simple black clothes and carrying no weapons at all. The rules allowed each fighter to choose their equipment, and he had decided that complicated gear would only slow him down. If he was going to have any chance of winning, it would be through speed and intelligence rather than firepower. The crowd murmured in confusion when they saw how unprepared he looked. Cairo entered from the opposite side of the arena, and the contrast could not have been more dramatic. He wore advanced battle armor that gleamed like liquid metal and carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. His helmet was shaped like a predator's skull, and his cape flowed behind him as he walked. Every step he took radiated confidence and power. The crowd cheered and gasped at his impressive appearance. The two fighters met in the center of the arena, where a Vulcan judge explained the rules one final time. The combat would continue until one participant surrendered, yielded, or was unable to continue fighting. No outside interference would be allowed, and any attempt to help either combatant would result in immediate disqualification. The judge looked at both fighters and asked if they were ready to begin. Cairo activated his weapons and took a fighting stance that showed years of military training. Energy crackled around his gauntlets and his armor systems came online with a series of mechanical sounds. He looked like a living war machine built for destruction and conquest. Teho simply stood with his hands at his sides and breathed slowly. He thought about everything Yuna had taught him and all the reasons he was fighting this battle. He was not just defending his marriage, but proving that love could be stronger than violence, and that courage came in many different forms. "Begin," shouted the judge, and the fight started immediately. Cairo launched himself forward with incredible speed, expecting to end the battle with a single devastating attack. His energy gauntlets left trails of light as they moved toward Teho's chest with enough force to punch through steel. But Teho was no longer standing where Cairo expected him to be, using the meditation techniques Yuna had taught him. Teho had entered a state of perfect awareness where time seemed to slow down. He could see Cairo's attack coming and moved just enough to avoid it without wasting energy on unnecessary motion. Cairo's fist passed through empty air while Teho slipped away like water flowing around a rock. For the next few minutes, the pattern repeated itself over and over. Cairo would attack with massive power and deadly precision, but somehow Teho was never quite where the blow was aimed. He moved like a ghost dancing between raindrops, never fighting back, but never getting hit either. The crowd began to murmur with surprise as they watched the tiny human avoid every attack from the mighty alien warrior. Cairo began to get frustrated, and his attacks became wilder and less controlled. He was using enormous amounts of energy, trying to catch an opponent who seemed to predict his every move. His armor was designed for short, brutal battles, not extended chases, and the power systems were starting to drain. Sweat ran down his face inside his helmet, and his breathing became labored. Teho remained calm and patient. He was getting tired too, but he was used to physical work from his years as a janitor. More importantly, he was fighting for something he believed in, while Cairo was fighting out of anger and wounded pride. Every time the alien warrior missed an attack, Teho could see him become more desperate and sloppy. The turning point came when Cairo made a critical mistake. In his fury, he put everything he had into one final overwhelming assault that was meant to finish the battle instantly. He leaped high into the air and came down with both gauntlets aimed at Teho's head with enough force to crater the arena floor. But Teho had been waiting for exactly this moment. Instead of dodging away, he stepped forward at the last second and used Cairo's own momentum against him. As the alien warrior came down, Teho grabbed his arm and used a simple judo throw that Yuna had shown him during their training sessions. Cairo's incredible strength worked against him as he crashed into the arena floor with tremendous impact. The alien warrior's armor cracked from the force of his landing, and several of his weapon systems sparked and went offline. He tried to get back up, but his left leg was injured and would not support his weight properly. For the first time in the battle, he looked uncertain and afraid. The human he had expected to crush in seconds had just thrown him across the arena. Like a child, Teho stood over his fallen opponent but did not attack. Instead, he offered his hand to help Cairo stand up. This gesture of mercy and respect surprised everyone watching, including Cairo himself. In that moment, the alien warrior realized that he had been wrong about this human. Someone who could show kindness to an enemy who had tried to kill him possessed a type of strength that could not be measured in muscle or weapons. "I yield," said Cairo quietly. The words were barely audible, but the judge's microphone picked them and broadcast them to the entire stadium. The crowd erupted in cheers that could be heard from space as they celebrated the impossible victory of love over violence. Teho had won the fight not through superior combat. The victory celebration at the stadium had barely ended when something unexpected happened that would change everything once again. A massive Velkan Imperial ship appeared in Earth's orbit and began descending toward the planet. This vessel was even larger than Kairos' warship and decorated with golden symbols that marked it as belonging to the royal family itself. The crowd that had been cheering for Teho suddenly fell silent with worry and fear. Emperor Daesung himself had come to Earth to see the human who had defeated one of his finest warriors in single combat. The old ruler was over 300 years old and had seen countless battles across dozens of worlds during his long reign. He had heard the reports about his daughter's marriage, but had never expected the situation to become so dramatic and public. Now the entire galaxy was watching to see what he would do next. The Emperor arrived at the stadium in a magnificent floating throne, surrounded by his personal guard. He was smaller than most Valkyns, but his presence filled the entire arena with quiet authority. His skin was pale blue, almost white with age, and his silver markings had faded to look like ancient tattoos. When he looked at Taeho, his purple eyes seemed to see straight through to his soul. Taeho felt more nervous facing this wise old alien than he had during his fight with Cairo. The Emperor had the power to declare war on Earth or dissolve his marriage to Yuna with a single word. Everything that had happened over the past months could be undone if Daesung decided that humans were not worthy of joining his family. My daughter, said the Emperor in a voice that carried clearly through the silent stadium, you have chosen an interesting mate? I came here expecting to find a primitive creature who had somehow tricked you into loving him. Instead, I watched a battle that reminded me why I first became interested in your species. He turned to address Taeho directly. Human warrior, you have shown qualities that I have rarely seen even among my own people. You faced an enemy who could have killed you easily, yet you fought with honor and showed mercy to someone who showed you none. This tells me more about your character than 1,000 battle reports ever could. The Emperor stood up from his throne and walked slowly down to the arena floor. Everyone held their breath as he approached Taeho and Yuna, who were standing hand in hand in the center of the fighting ring. When he reached them, he studied Taeho with intense curiosity as if trying to solve a puzzle that had been bothering him for years. Tell me, human, said the Emperor, what drives you to such courage? Do you fight for glory like our young warriors do? Or do you seek power and conquest like so many species across the galaxy? Taeho thought carefully about his answer because he knew it might determine the future relationship between Earth and the Velkan Empire. He looked at Yuna, whose eyes were filled with love and support, and then back at her father, who waited patiently for his response. Your Majesty, said Taeho, I fight for the people I care about and for the chance to build something better than what existed before. I am not brave because I want to be famous or powerful. I am brave because someone I love believes in me, and because I would rather face any danger than live without hope. The Emperor nodded slowly as if this answer confirmed something he had already suspected. In my long life, he said, I have conquered many worlds and defeated countless enemies. But I have learned that the greatest victories are not won through force, but through understanding. Your species may be physically weaker than ours, but you possess something that we have sometimes forgotten in our pursuit of military strength. He raised his voice so that everyone in the stadium and everyone watching on television across the galaxy could hear his next words clearly. I, Emperor Daesung of the Velkan Empire, do hereby declare that the marriage between my daughter Princess Yuna and the human Taeho is not only valid, but blessed by the throne itself. Furthermore, I name Taeho as an honorary member of the royal family with all the rights and privileges that this status brings. The crowd exploded in cheers that seemed to shake the entire planet. Fireworks launched from every building in the city while news broadcasters struggled to describe the historic moment to their audiences. In one afternoon, a simple janitor had become galactic royalty and changed the relationship between two entire civilizations. But the Emperor was not finished with his announcements. From this day forward, he continued, Earth and the Velkan Empire will be more than allies. We will be family. Trade between our worlds will increase, and our young people will study together to learn from each other. What my daughter and her husband have proven today is that strength comes in many forms and that love can bridge any gap between different peoples. Over the next few weeks, the changes began immediately. Velkan ships arrived at Earth carrying teachers, scientists, and artists who wanted to learn about human culture. Human students were offered scholarships to study at Velkan universities, while Earth companies signed contracts to share technology with their alien counterparts. The marriage that had started as a cruel prank had become the foundation for a new era of cooperation and friendship. Taeho and Yuna decided to open a cultural center in the heart of the city where humans and aliens could meet and learn about each other. The building was designed with both Earth and Velkan architectural styles, and featured gardens where plants from both worlds grew side by side. Tae-ho taught classes about human literature and philosophy while Yuna demonstrated Velkan martial arts and meditation techniques. The center became incredibly popular with visitors from across the galaxy, who wanted to see the place where the famous love story had begun. Children from dozens of different species played together in the gardens while their parents attended lectures about art, music, and science from various cultures. What had once seemed impossible became normal as beings who had never imagined living together in peace found common ground through shared curiosity and respect. 6 months after the battle, Dongmin came to visit Tae-ho at the cultural center. The man who had started everything with his mean-spirited prank now looked embarrassed and ashamed as he stood in the lobby, surrounded by aliens and humans working together happily. He had been promoted again after accidentally creating the most successful diplomatic marriage in galactic history, but he knew that his success was built on what could have been a terrible mistake. "I owe you an apology," said Dongmin when he found Tae-ho teaching a group of young Valkyns how to grow Korean vegetables. "What I did to you was cruel and stupid, and I am sorry. I never imagined that things would turn out like this or that you would become such an important person." Tae-ho looked at his former supervisor and smiled with genuine warmth. "You do not need to apologize," he said. "If you had not played that prank on me, I never would have met Yuna or discovered that I was capable of being brave." Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes we could never have planned. That evening, as the sun set over the city, Tae-ho and Yuna stood together on the roof garden of their cultural center. Around them, plants from Earth and Velkan space grew in harmony while the lights of spacecraft moved across the star-filled sky. They had created something beautiful together that was helping to bring peace and understanding to the entire galaxy. As they watched the stars, Yuna taught Tae-ho new words in the Velkan language while he showed her how to identify Earth constellations. They talked about their plans to visit her home planet next month and their hopes of starting a family that would represent the best of both their peoples. What had begun as the joke marriage of a janitor to an alien princess had become the greatest love story in the history of two worlds. The universe was vast and full of wonders they had yet to discover, but they would face whatever came next together. Sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the most ordinary people who find the courage to reach beyond what they thought was possible and discover that love truly can conquer any obstacle the cosmos can create.